What is shaking, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast. You're in for a treat today. This young lady has a lot of energy, a lot of knowledge, and a ton of wisdom. Lyndsay Dowd has a 25 plus year, highly decorated sales career as an individual contributor, manager, and executive. As the founder of Heartbeat for Hire, she helps sales teams and leaders elevate their culture in order to increase profits, employee retention, and career fulfillment across the board. She has expertise in software sales and has built diverse and highly productive teams in her 23 years at IBM. Lyndsay, you are on today. How are you doing?
I'm awesome, JM. It's so nice to be here. And I'm so excited to talk with you because I think we have so many things in common.
Well, as we talked off air, I mean, literally what you were talking about, I'm like, were you in my office this morning? Culture, leadership. I mean, I'm pretty passionate about this, but I want to hear your story. I want to hear your journey. 23 years at IBM, obviously a great company.
Yeah.
How did this all evolve? Tell me your story.
Yeah, I am. Like I said, I've worked for IBM for 23 years and, was very fortunate in that I had wonderful, wonderful examples of leadership. The one thing, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is there was an incredible culture of advocacy. And I want to come back to that. But what that allowed for is me to experience a lot of different styles of leadership. And what I recognized, my sweet spot is creating this very rich culture that people want to be a part of. And in sales, that is sometimes not a big place where people focus. In sales, everybody kind of looks at the sellers as you're on a different comp plan. You've got your own HR team, you get big prizes, you get big checks. What else could you need? And the reality is we watched this great resignation. We watched all these people leave their jobs, and a lot of them left their jobs with no job to go to. They were just fed up. They were pissed. They were done. They didn't want to be treated poorly anymore. And what I've seen is a lot of leaders and a lot of managers have not evolved with the times. They really have relied on their tried and true practices. And sometimes those practices are not really what people want now. And I look at, there's a really great example in Richard Branson. He always puts his people first. And when he puts his people first, they perform. And so after all those years with IBM and the short stint at another company, I recognized I had this opportunity. The whole landscape had changed. And I said, what am I good at? What do I love to do? And how can I help people? And I wrote this job description of this chief heartbeat officer. And it was interesting. I was interviewing with a lot of different folks and they're like, you could do so many things. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be this chief heartbeat officer. Well, what is it? I said, well, it's a function of sales. It's not an HR role. And it is essentially working with all of the sales leaders to create this rich culture for people to thrive and prosper. It's a culture of positivity. It's a culture of encouragement. And when you create that space and you create that psychological safety for people, they rise up, they create best practices, they do extraordinary things, they collaborate. And that's the environment I want all salespeople to thrive in. I talked to so many leaders, and I talked to one a few months ago, and she was an extraordinary leader, and she really loved to be honest with her team. She was a servant leader. She was great. But her leadership put her in a position where she was compromising her values, and they lied to her, and she had to either decide, I'm going to lie to my people, or I'm going to be honest with my people and pit myself against my leadership. That's a shitty position to be in. And I don't want to see other people experience that. So I'm trying to help leaders make it right.
I'm curious, just for that young lady, did she leave that position?
She didn't. She stayed. And I think this is kind of a phenomenon that I see where people that have been in any organization for 5 years or longer have that fear of, I don't know what's on the other side, or I love these people and I'm loyal to these people, and they kind of stick to that, and they don't they don't release themselves from the prison they're in. And it's heartbreaking when I see it, because especially when someone's so talented, I just want to see her thrive and do so well. And she's not in the right spot to do that.
Yeah, I asked that, as you know, very intentionally, because anytime somebody compromises their values, I mean,
Yeah.
my God, that's one of the worst things a human being can do to
Yeah.
themselves. And
Yeah. It's painful.
I hate it. I try not to hate things, but I really, really don't like that.
You know, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's an SVP at a company. We were just talking about leadership practices, and she gave me this really great visual. She says, when your phone lights up and it's your boss, does the hair on your neck stand up, or are you excited to talk to them? And that should be a really easy indicator of, am I in the right spot? Am I working for the right people? Am I in a place where the culture is healthy? I was lucky. I had a lot of bosses I loved to speak with and share ideas and create best practices, and they all get Christmas cards to this day. So, but I had plenty that were awful, and helped me build this. So.
No, it is. I like that. I mean, it's a really simple idea, but it's true. And that goes for not just our bosses, but people we talk to. Like,
Yeah.
if you're not excited to talk to them, just like, nope, this is not the right thing.
Yeah.
All right, but let's focus on some of these cool things. You mentioned a word that I love.
Yeah.
And that was advocacy, because I think back, I was an advocate back in college, and I would take kids around that were considered schools. We don't really do that in professional life, and we mentor programs, quote unquote, but we don't have the advocacy in corporate America for some reason. Why is that?
So I think what it stems from is there is an insecurity at the top. The people that believe that, and when I have a leader who can set their ego aside and say, hey, if you want to talk to this other leader, I encourage you to do that. These are people that support a career path and recognize you've got talent and you're not going to be on their team forever. The worst situation is where you have this kind of militant, insecure leader who's like, you dared call over my head, or you dared call, you didn't clear it with me first. I didn't pave the way for you. Nonsense. What is the biggest difference between advocacy and mentorship? I mean, I've dabbled in mentorship. You have to have two really willing people that are committed to checking in regularly, and that grows. Advocacy is different. Advocacy is taking an interest in people, allowing them to reach out to you if you're a leader, or if you're an employee, having the courage to reach out to them, say, I really admire the way you spoke on that last call. I think I have a lot to learn from you. Would you entertain a 30-minute conversation? I just want to understand more about the business you're running. First of all, if you're a leader, that should be very flattering, and it should be a nice thing for you to give back to people on your team. But as a leader, you also want to invest in your people. So you want good talent coming up through the ranks, and you want to make sure you understand who it is on your field that you get to pick from. So in my case at IBM, we had a lot of that. And that was an extraordinary thing for me, because I had a lot of people that would be like, hey, you and so would get along great. You need to set up time with them and spend some time so they can understand who you are. I'd say probably 5 of the jobs that I got at IBM was because of just that. And I'll give you one really good story. So I was referred to a woman, and I didn't know her. I knew of her, and I knew she was hiring, and that's pretty much all I knew. And she was a senior VP, and she's like, all right, tell me your story. Who are you? And I did. And I told her the things that I loved and the things that I loved to do and where I thought I could be useful. And I said, so based on all of that, do you have any roles open? She said, yeah, I have 5. And I said, well, I only need 1. And she said, no, I'm going to tell you all 5 and you can pick, because you're qualified for all of these jobs. Well, that set my career in a whole different direction. And I wouldn't have known that. And here's the thing with sales. Sales, people aren't very creative when it comes to career paths. And so often you'll see a phenomenal rep who crushes it quarter after quarter, year after year. And immediately management says, well, we need to magnify that. We need to replicate that. So they have to be a manager. well, does that person delight in the success of others? Or do they really only care about their own pocketbook? Because I had a rep, she was phenomenal. She was getting $1 million commission checks like every other year, crushing it. She should never have been a manager. And thank God she knew that. But someone gave her this stupid impression that her resume was stale because she had been doing the same thing for 10 years. I'm like, I'm sorry. If you're getting $1 million commission checks, I think you're pretty successful. So that's nonsense. So what do you do with somebody like that? Put them on stage, let them teach a class, let them teach others how they do what they do. Learn from them, create levels of mastery in their roles so they have something to achieve and aspire to beyond their commission checks. There's so many ways to encourage that kind of creativity and create incentives for that person so that it is continually magnified. But putting them in a management role when they really shouldn't be is just a poor choice. And it just creates a toxic environment that I end up having to correct.
Well, no doubt about it. It is interesting how often that traditional hierarchy, we're like, well, if you did this, the next step is that, when no, man, you're really good at sales and great. If you're, like you said, I call them the lone wolf, this gal that was so successful, but not necessarily going to be a leader or a manager. Great. Be the lone wolf, be the most kick-ass salesperson for a long time. That's great.
And if you're the leader that takes them out of that role and then wonders what happened to your pipeline, you're just a dope, because you just took your rock star player off the field.
Yeah. And I have a question that we're going to get to on culture, but I have to go back to the gal that said, hey, tell me your story.
Yes.
What a brilliant way
one of my favorites
on talent, and say, look, I'm not giving you a job description. Oh, you don't fit it. Never mind. This isn't for you. Talk to me about you. And this was, I'm guessing, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, this was a while ago. But let me tell you, I had a manager once, similar style. She said to me, this was before the days of Zoom, so we hadn't met face to face, just conference calls. And we were going to a conference and I got to sit with her and she said, okay, good. I'm glad we have a little bit of time. Tell me your story. And I kind of went, the story about this job, the story about like my career, like what story? She said, no, your life. I want to know who you are. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that could take a second. Are you sure? And so I told her my story and she said, no, that was so helpful, because now I understand why you're motivated the way you are, what makes you tick. And it became a tool that I used with my teams. And it allowed me to understand the kinds of things they're passionate about, the kinds of things they believe they're good at. And it allowed me to ask questions to say, hey, you told me you love speaking in front of people. We got to afford some more opportunities for that. You want to speak on the next all hands call? And asking those questions and finding out what is interesting to people will always help you be a better leader. And it's also going to give you your finger on the pulse to what their superpowers are. And if you don't ask, which in sales, people are like, oh, the pressure's high. You know, we've got to make our numbers. We don't have time for these conversations. We don't have time for the soft skills stuff. This isn't soft skills anymore. This is how do you make or break your team? And if you're not doing this, I promise you, they're going to leave. That's what's happened. So you got to make the environment rich for your people to feel valued and seen. And if you don't, you're playing with fire.
Yeah, it is interesting because I even use the term soft skills, but the truth is it's just people skills. And you talked about the Great Resignation, which I'm not sure where the hell this came from. And I certainly want to change it.
Yeah.
But these are essential skills to leadership. And so you're building teams, you're building with people. You have to have these skills, whether you want to call them soft or hard or people. They are essential.
It's leadership skills. You're right.
100%. I want to get into the culture part because you said a word twice right in front of it, and that is a rich culture. So you're defining not only culture, but you're defining it is more than just this cookie cutter culture. It is a rich culture. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah. So I think This is a great question. I love to teach people when they're interviewing, and I have to just pause and say, when people are interviewing, we are no longer, you are in the hot seat, you get to ask nothing. Nowadays, you get to ask lots of questions, and one of those questions should be, tell me about your culture. So you're going to get an interesting array of answers. And if the leader can quickly say, oh my gosh, this is something we pride ourselves on. We spend a lot of time working with our people to ensure that they have solid career paths, or anything like that is a good answer. Sometimes they'll knee jerk to, well, yeah, we have business resource groups. With the very heavy head nod of, right, that's the culture. We have free ping pong, we have free beer. We'll do lunch outside on Wednesdays, or that sort of stuff. That's not culture. Culture is the ability to create that psychological safety for people to be their best. And psychological safety is a funny phrase because some people are very put off by it. They think it means, oh, you can just be mediocre. I've created this safe space and you can just hide out. It's actually the total opposite. It's basically saying, all right, I want to understand who you are so you can rise up and be your best. And as a leader, it's your responsibility to provide that. And I'll give you a really good illustration. I had a boss once who said to me, I didn't like how you represented yourself on that call. It sucked. It wasn't clear. I just don't think you did a good job, and you better fix it for the next time. Well, how do you think I did the next time? I sucked.
I was gonna say.
I was so anxious. I was so nervous. I wasn't relying on my sense of humor. I wasn't relying on my personality, my instincts, which is kind of what gets me in the door all the time. On the flip side, had they said, how'd you think that call went? I wasn't really happy with it. I don't think I got my point across. I think I could have done better on this part. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Why do you think that? And yeah, I'll agree with you. I think we could have improved here. Well, don't you think I'm going to step up and say, okay, she totally sat there and told me the things that I needed to do. Now I know what to do, and I can call her and check myself and role play if I need to. And so there's this one question I love to ask. I teach managers to ask this all the time, and it's this methodology I called inverted management. It basically says, how can I be the best manager for you? And that's a very humbling question as a leader to ask. I've asked it, and you're making yourself vulnerable when you're doing it. You're saying, I don't know everything, but every good leader doesn't know everything. And what happens is you get these wildly different answers from everyone you ask. Someone might just want to coach. Someone might want to role play. I had one rep who said, I just need an escalation point. So just be my heavy when I need you. One person said, I need you to help manage some of the executive relationships in this account. And great. So all of these people need different things. It's just like parenting. You can't parent your children all the same because they're different. You can't lead your reps all the same because they're different. You need to take the time to understand what they need so they can be their best. So culture is all a part of all of that. And that is inclusive of diversity. It's inclusive of the way you speak. When you create this space for people to share and to talk about the things that have worked for them, and you cheer them on, it's contagious. People do it themselves. I talked to this woman the other day. She was telling me about the phenomenal culture at her company. And she said, our VP, she's in like an office where a lot of people sit together. And she said, this VP walks around and puts Post-it notes on people's desks saying, I love the way you did X, or great job on this. And she'd been doing it for a couple of weeks, and it started catching on, and other people started doing it. And they weren't leaders, they were peers, but they were like, great job on the sale. And when you kind of create that culture of positivity and openness and recognition, which is so underutilized, that's when the goodness really happens.
Well, here's what I love about that story with the Post-it notes. And this is what I definitely teach all of my teams. The most effective leadership, in my humble opinion, is peer leadership. It is far greater than the CEO that says, hey, what's your name again? Oh, Tom. Tom, you did a good job. Look, that when your peer says to you, Lyndsay, you kicked ass on that phone call. You took care of it. that is the strongest form of
Yeah.
leadership, in my opinion. So I love that they did that. I want to ask you on the culture side, because one
Yeah.
of the things that I see, and I imagine the same for you, the reason we're going to have jobs for a long time is when you ask that question, tell me about your culture, and they say something, but then let's say the next interview, you ask that same question and they say something completely different. How often are you seeing that with companies, Lyndsay? Because
Well,
like,
every company has a different culture, right? And they all have their own stories. I have a friend who works for Zoom, and that culture is crazy rich and really fun. The CEO tells his people he loves them on every all hands call. Now, I'm not saying every leader needs to do that, but he also created a fun squad. That's really freaking cool. These people are infusing fun at all turns. They are embracing differences. They are celebrating Pride Month. They're celebrating Black History Month. They're celebrating their Asian colleagues that really needed the support during the pandemic. So when you see those kinds of steps and you can hear people articulate it, it's really important. So another question I love to ask, or I tell people to ask when they're interviewing is, can I speak to a couple people on your team? The way that's answered will give you a very good indication of the culture. If they say, absolutely, in fact, I'm going to give you 3 names. Here's their names, here's their numbers. Please go talk to them. Versus, we don't really do that. And we'll prefer that you're on the team first before you have those conversations. Red flag, red flags. Stop. Like, that's worrisome. And, looking up those people, are they posting regularly? Are they saying good things about the company? If you have a company with pride of place, people will talk about it. And that's the best advertising you could ever have.
so you've mentioned great leaders. You've mentioned not so great leaders.
Yeah.
Let's go to the not so great leaders. I want to
Sure.
talk about some of the attributes that if I don't want to be a bad leader, you don't do these things. If you want to be a
Yeah.
great leader, don't do these things. What are some
So,
not so great?
yeah. I mean, trust is a big one, right? And you want to trust your leader. You want to know that they've got your back. You want to know that it's a safe space. And I worked for a woman who was probably the least trustworthy person I had ever met. And she had a real reputation for that, which I did not know until it was too late. But when the same person said, I asked her about positive feedback. I said, I've been doing this job for a few months. You don't offer any positive feedback. And her response was, oh, you and my husband would get along well. And I kind of went, oh no, this is a character flaw. This isn't a style. And the next time I brought it up a few weeks later, I said, we talked about that and I really hadn't seen any change. She said, well, I worry if I give you any positive feedback, you'll think you're doing great all over. That's a very stingy way to lead. And truth be told, if you encourage people and you provide support, one of my favorite managers said to me, I was telling her a story and my approach to this client that I had, and she said, girl, I've got your back, now fly. Do you know how empowering that statement was to me? Obviously, it stuck with me for many, many years, but I felt I could take risks. I felt that if I tried something different and I tried something new, she was in my corner. And that is a leadership fundamental that I think all leaders need to have. Your people need to know that you've got their back. And I don't think that's real difficult. I don't think anything I teach is real difficult. I think it's behavior modification, it's language choice, it's management methodologies. And are you a manager or are you a leader? Anybody can be a manager, but if you're a leader, you create this environment of goodness that will always get you results. And that's the whole reason I do this. It's not just for the warm and fuzzies. We want people to perform. That's the point.
What's so interesting about the gal that said, look, if I give you positive feedback, that disgusting statement that she used, I actually just want to give the gal a hug and say, what happened along the way, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is environmental. She didn't come out of the womb and it's like, I'm just going to be a shitty leader. No, she learned this probably from her parents, would be my guess.
Well, and she was an extraordinary rep. She's one of those examples of she probably would have been an extraordinary rep had she continued. She didn't have the right leadership ahead of her who were giving her the right guidelines on how to manage. And she hadn't taken any classes in ages. And she did not value what she called soft skills. So when I say leaders need to evolve, that's what I'm talking about. That's so important. The days of aggressive, belittling, I'm going to shine the spotlight on you because you're dumb kind of stuff, that's long gone. No one can do that anymore. And if you do, you're not working in an environment that's very healthy.
Yeah, and you will become a dinosaur. There's no question about it. And
Yeah.
this is not giving out sixth place trophies. That's not what Lyndsay's talking about. She's just talking about having genuine empathy,
Yes.
having genuinely given a shit about the person that you are leading.
Yeah.
Which leads me to the question of, because I agree with you on the psychological safety, and I've talked about this on the show, but I want to get from your vantage point, how do we create that? Because Google did a study, right? The 3 things the best teams do is psychological safety, trust, and equal speaking time. So I'm in on that. I'm all for what you said. How do we create psychological safety? Because the one gal didn't, right? No positive feedback. That's not feeling real safe. But your other gal that said, I got your back, fly. It was as easy as saying, I'm going to support you. And if you do screw up, we're going to talk about it.
That's it. I mean, for me, it comes back to that question of how can I be the best manager for you? But that's a very disarming question to be asked, right? I mean, think about it. When somebody asks you, if you report to them, that most of the reactions are, wow, okay. So let me think about that for a second. Yeah, here's the things that I think I need. And you're giving them permission to ask for things, which that's really flipped, because usually it's the manager saying, I need you to do this, and can you please, and can you finish, and this deadline is, or get it in by such and such a date. We need, our numbers depend on this transaction, whatever it is, versus what do you need from me? How can I help you be your best? And when you ask that question, you open the door to build trust. The other thing, which is so basic and so simple, is asking them about themselves. What's your life like? What's your family like? Do you have a dog? Do you like to hike? Do you like to eat? do you make cocktails? There's 1,000 topics you can cover where you're just creating an opportunity to understand. And those connections cannot be valued more. I mean, they're so critical to our success as humans, as leaders. And I did a fun exercise with my team during the pandemic. It was a very big organization. It was like 85 people. And I recognized that there was a lot of people coming from different parts of the business that didn't know each other, that didn't understand what everybody was selling. And we needed to create an opportunity for them to be together, because there was no conferences, there was no meetings happening. So I did a Kahoot. And if you know what a Kahoot is, they're just those fun kind of multimedia quizzes with music and pictures. And I asked everyone to send me a multiple choice or a little known fact that no one knew about them. And I created this multiple choice quiz. And the quiz was simple. It was, 4 answers. And the questions were like, which person on the team has visited every major ballpark in North America except one? And so I had 3 guys and 1 girl in the answer, and they all answered the guys, and it was the woman. And they're like, Marcia, I didn't know that about you. That's so cool. And it created a talking point. And no one forgot it. And even though this quiz had a lot of questions, everyone remembered something about someone else. And to be remembered is to be honored. So when someone says, you came from Kenya, and tell me about your life in Kenya. I mean, I had this guy I adore. He was a manager. I promoted him to a manager, and he's doing so well. And he told us this amazing story about how in his culture and in his wife's culture, he had to pay for his wife with cows. Do you think anyone ever forgot this story? It was so wild for us to hear it, because it's not something that's done in the States. And anyway, it became this incredible, tell the story about the cows. but you're giving that recognition, you're giving that I see you kind of moment to the people that you're with. And that's what people crave. They crave collaboration, community, and purpose. And that's what leaders have to provide.
So before I ask my real question, how many cows did it take?
He said he was taken. He said the uncles told him way more than he really needed. So he overbought on the cows and he didn't know it until later, but I think it was like a dozen. It was a lot.
Well, I'm sure, good for him. That's awesome. So what you're really talking about when I hear that is connection. When you ask, hey, do you like to have cocktails on the weekend? You like to go for a hike?
Yeah.
All HR compliant, right? Nothing
Yeah.
asking religion or age.
These are easy. These are softballs. Yeah.
It's connection, right? That's what
Yeah.
I hear is like everyone connected with the gentleman from Kenya, I believe you said.
Mhm.
Cows. It's like, how could I forget this gentleman? And now I have a connection to him. You mentioned some ideas. What are some other ways to create that connection piece? Because if I'm a leader listening, I'm like, all right, maybe my culture isn't where I want it to be.
Mhm.
And maybe I want to do these things. I just don't know how. What
Mhm.
is maybe you said a softball earlier, but let's give a softball answer of
Sure.
this is how you can create some real connection, community within your culture.
Well, I had a leader who said to me, it was really cool. She promoted me and she said, "Okay, I want to hear your ideas." And I'm like, "Ab- about my new job?" Like about, she goes, "Yeah, you got hired because of your ideas and the way you think about things. So let's hear it." And I said, "All right, give me a minute because I want to go back to my team." And so I went back to my team and I said, "All right, guys, we have an opportunity to try new things. I don't think you've been given that opportunity in a while. So let's think about it. What things have worked for you? What things did you really, really love? Tell me, even if it didn't work, tell me the part that you liked that did." And what came out of that was I recognized we had a bunch of different people selling a bunch of different things and nobody knew what the other product did. And I said, "Okay, we're going to baseline this. We're going to make a storytelling program and we're going to feature a different person each week to tell the story about what it is they sell, but they have to tell the story like they're telling it to their mom." And so it gave everyone this really simple understanding of the technology. And it got so good and it got so interesting for everybody because everyone likes listening to a story, that I said, "We're going to turn this into a call series." And so we'd have 500 people dialing in. And I had all these calls from business partners we were working with. They're like, "I had never heard that explained that way before. I'm now changing my strategy because this is so complementary to what I do. And this is great." Well, I don't own this. This isn't the Lyndsay creation. We did this as a team. And so when other leaders were calling me going, "Dowd, how did you do that? Tell me what's going on. Why are you having all these people come to your calls? This is amazing." I said, "No, my team built this." And I'm giving them the credit. I am giving them the opportunity for the recognition. And so spoke on this call and told that story. Talk to them. They're the ones that really understand this, not me. And sharing that spotlight, giving that recognition repeatedly makes you a really special leader. It makes you someone that people want to warm to, they want to come to, they want to share their goodness. But we created this space for when something is good, I want to know. And when something fell apart and it really didn't work, let's understand why and let's take the good parts and repeat. Let's figure it out. Let's tweak it. Let's work on it together. We're going to fail. Not everything's going to be good, but we have to recognize why we failed and fix it for the future. And when you can kind of create that space, that's when the magic happens. That's when people are knocking down your door saying, "I want to be a part of that team. They're fun. And I watch people get promoted out of your organization. I watch you promote your people," which is so great. So that's
No,
a
I love
good
it.
one.
What's so cool is you had an opportunity to answer the question right there and you said, wait a minute, let me talk to my team.
Yeah.
Why don't more leaders give the credit to their team? The great
Uh,
leaders do, right? And
yeah.
this is a big question, obviously, because I would love to see more leaders say it's about the team. It's not about me. Go talk to my team just the way you did. I think that's beautiful. Why don't more people do it? What is it? Is it an ego thing? Is it fear?
You know what
Tell me.
it is?
I'm so curious.
It's imposter syndrome. It's definitely ego. And it's a moment where these people are, shit, if I don't tell them I did this, they're not going to think I'm valuable. They're not going to think that I came up with these ideas. And this is an old school mentality, right? And, when you have that kind of, I haven't modernized my leadership skills in 20 years mentality, they want to know that they're stacking, they're surrounding themselves with these A players, right? They want to know that their people are rock stars. But the rock stars are the people that shine the light on others. They're the ones that are they're so generous with their accolades, their recognition. And the best leaders I ever had were the ones that were like, Lyndsay, tell your story about what happened the other day, because A, it's really freaking funny, but B, we could all learn from you. That is such a easy, like, cool, I want to hear this. What's she gonna say? Like, it's just creating an opportunity for goodness, for kindness, for challenging, for collaboration. It's all goodness. I just think it's an insecurity that people don't do that more. And I think it's an old school leadership thing where you're so, I have to let people know that I'm good. And the only way I can do that is by claiming all the credit. That's just not the truth.
Yeah, and you've talked about leadership evolving a couple times, and you've mentioned, like, look, if you don't do some work, if you don't continue to put, so where is this work? I mean, maybe it's listening to Lyndsay and hiring
Of
Heartbeat.
course, it's listening to me.
Of course. But what are some other tools and resources that you've found helpful?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there are some brilliant, brilliant minds out there like Simon Sinek and I mean, follow Richard Branson. I mean, there's just some really, the hair on my face is driving me crazy. Um, there are some really brilliant minds, and I'm certainly not the only one that has come up with these ideas. But at a baseline, follow them on Instagram, follow them on LinkedIn. That's just easy. If you want to read books, there's tons and tons and tons of books out there. But I also think, you can do simple things like following specific hashtags. Like a lot of my content, if you go on LinkedIn and you do hashtag sales culture, you're going to see a lot of my stuff. But compassionate leadership is a good one. If you've never stated that you are a compassionate leader, that's an easy way to kind of see what people are talking about. And the reality is, what I'm talking about isn't so different than what you talk about, or what Harvard Business Review or McKinsey or Fast Company or all the other major players are talking about. And a lot of this came out of the Great Resignation, and which is now the Great Reset, the Great Rethink, the Great Reimagining, which is the way I prefer to see it. But yeah, there's so much content out there that you just have to absorb or take a class. There's hundreds of thousands of classes on LinkedIn. You can join any of those. A lot of them are for free. I was fortunate going through many, many, many years of Harvard classes, Duke classes, tons of these classes that were sponsored by my company. And that's a great tip too. If you see a class you want to take, ask your company if you can do it. Say, I want to be a better leader. I want to hire a coach. There's this woman, Lyndsay, I heard of. I want to talk to her. I think she could really help me. That's the thing that it was really interesting when I was building my company. I was talking to my parents about it, and they're very anxious because, I had the security of a paycheck. I had the security of this big company behind me for, decades of my life. And I said, you have to understand something. I'm investing in myself, and I've never done that before. And they're like, no, you're right, girl, we got your back. Now fly. And that support, not financial, but that emotional and psychological support means a lot. But taking that time to invest in yourself is crucial to your success. And not enough leaders take advantage of that. And I would venture to guess, if you work for any reasonably large size corporation, they have those courses and they're at the ready. All you have to do is sign up for them.
I want a second and third and fourth, everything she just said, because when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to go get better, I want to improve.
Yeah.
How? You know how many stupid $1,000 happy hours and
Yes.
dinners that I've wasted,
Yes.
where I would much rather spend it on you bettering yourself to invest in yourself, as you said. I love what you just, that's so impactful. I love it.
Yeah.
Speaking of impactful, I'm just curious because you've mentioned books. Do you, off the top of your head, the top 1 to 3 most impactful books that you've ever read that have really struck a chord and made a profound impact on the Lyndsay Dowd that we get to enjoy today?
Oh God. I think there's a lot of really amazing content out there that I'm gonna throw you a curveball and say there's, from a book's perspective, some of my books that have been most inspiring to me are not necessarily corporate books. They're not the ones that everybody kind of gravitates to. I mean, anybody that you follow, like Brene Brown or Mel Robbins, or certainly Gary Vee, who's got a different spin on culture and investing in people. Those are all really phenomenal content creators. But there's a guy on LinkedIn who I'm connected to. He wrote a book called Unlike a Boss, so much about what you and I talk about. I think there's one book that I come back to over and over again. It's called The Alchemist, and it's about attracting things to your life and creating this this culture of or this mindset of growth. It's something that I've been talking to my husband a lot about lately because he runs his own business, and being in that growth mindset versus scarcity is really important. I'm going to have to think some more on the books because I have so many, but I just redid my office, so none of my books are here. So I was about to look, but I'm like, oh, they're not here.
Look, I have not read Unlike a Boss, but The Alchemist is fantastic. If you guys haven't read it, it's definitely worth checking out. Paulo Coelho, I think, is how you say that.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
I just want to give you open forum because I've asked you lots of different questions on leadership, on teams and culture. Anything you want to leave the audience with that I just didn't know enough to ask? You go ahead. This is open.
I have one tip that we didn't cover, and I think this is so crucial. And I learned a lot about this in creating my own company. So the big statement I'm going to make is you are not your job. And why I say this is on LinkedIn, I see this all the time, especially with people that are in corporate jobs. You are not only your job, and you have to create a personal brand for yourself. And the personal brand is about, who are you at your core? What do you want people to believe about you? What do you want people to know about you? How do you want yourself represented in the world? And there are some people who do it very well, and there are some people who haven't figured it out yet. But it's so important for people to think of themselves as dynamic human beings, because that's what we all are. And I don't think people really only like a polished version of a human. They like seeing the goofs. They like seeing the humble humanity side of things. And I kind of chuckle when I look at some of the posts that I've made. And, I did what I thought was just a decent video. I didn't think it was a great video. It went bananas on Instagram. I don't know why that video over the other ones went so viral, but it did. And you just never know how it's going to hit. But if you only represent yourself as your job, you are selling yourself short, because there's probably things that you are extremely passionate about, and things that you could share with the world that would attract a different group of people to who you are. And especially if you are in a position like the woman we talked about at the beginning, who's compromised her values, that's a perfect example of someone who needs to dust off her LinkedIn profile, put the kind of things that she's passionate about, and get some endorsements and some reviews on LinkedIn, so people understand how freaking great she was. I mean, I could shout from the rooftops how great she was, and I could tell her that I have 4 people looking for a new VP of sales. You'd be amazing for it. But if she's not ready to go, she's not ready to go. I can't push her. But she'd be surprised by the response that she could get by taking a little time to kind of dust it off and figure that out.
No, I love that, because when people introduce themselves as I'm so-and-so and this is what I do, I'm like, And I don't care, man. Labels are for boxes. You're not a box. So I love that. Lyndsay, you're awesome. You have so much knowledge and great energy. Where can people connect with you online if they want to know more about what you're doing and who you're all about?
So my website is heartbeatforhire.com, and I'm on LinkedIn, Insta, and Facebook at Lyndsay Dowd, H4H. And I'm happy to talk to anyone. I do offer free consultation if there's anyone that needs coaching or group coaching. One of the cool things that came out of this that I didn't expect was a leader reached out to me and he said, we're hiring a new VP of sales. We want you to be our cultural mouthpiece so they understand how critical our culture is to their success. So you become kind of a de facto representative from us, and making sure that they understand how this needs to be done. And I love that. So I'm pretty creative and excited to help people figure out whatever it is they're struggling with. But because I'm my own show, I get to do whatever I want. It's pretty cool.
Well, it is cool, and you're bringing a ton of value, and I appreciate you taking the time, spreading the love and the culture, because look, we need it. The world needs it. I like what you said. We're going from great resignation to, what'd you say? Great what?
The great reimagining, the great rethink, the great reset.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you. I appreciate you being here.
My pleasure. Thanks, JM.
Guys, there's a ton of things you can take away from this. I mean, we've all had those great leaders. We've had those bad leaders too. And she gave you some really impactful questions. And the basic but simple nature of them is so profound when you ask them. So I love that she brought that to the table. So go back, listen to it. Share this with other people. Share it with the leaders that need a little help. They could use some of Lyndsay's love here. So until next time, remember, your mindset matters. We'll talk to you then. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.